Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second SecondaryLink podcast. With me, I got Chad Gracia, who is a broker at Rainmaker Securities. He focuses on direct private secondary transactions. So, Chad, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Glad to be here. Happy to have a chat with you.
So first, just to kick us off, if you don't mind, just in your own words, if you could just describe, a little bit about yourself, or kind of your background, and then naturally just kind of what you're up to today at Rainmaker.
Yeah, sure. I came to this job in a little bit of a strange way. So let me give a quick background. In the mid 90s, I was a private tutor for the Saudi royal family, and then the Bahraini royal family, and then the Kuwaiti. It was my first job.
Oh, wow.
College, basically.
Very cool.
So I did a lot of private tutoring, and I grew my business to around 500 really high net worth people and royal family members in the GCC.
Oh, wow.
And I kept in touch with everyone. I did that for many years, and then around 2000, 2001, I ventured into other areas, Shakespeare theater, filmmaking, some other things. But I kept in touch with these contacts. And I also kept writing. I was a speechwriter for the Saudi royal court. So I did speech writing, I did advising. And one day, maybe around 2005 or 6, one of these Saudis called me up and said, hey, we have $20 million. And how should I invest it? And I didn't really know, but I knew a bunch of hedge funds that were on our board for our theater company. And I said, okay, well, let me introduce you. So kind of overnight, I became a placement agent. I raised around $1 billion+ from my former clients in the Middle East.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
I went through, I got my Series 7, I did that whole thing. And then I started from 2008 to 12, just hiking like an old school guy, hiking from Kuwait to Qatar to Riyadh, Jeddah, basically raising capital. Obama administration called me up in 2012 and said, will you run our venture capital trade mission program to formalize what you're doing and help American VCs raise more capital from the Middle East? So I agreed. I did that up until COVID. Right around that time, right around 2017, 18, my LPs, family offices, sovereign funds, pension funds in the Middle East, started complaining about VC fees, and they said, Chad, we want to do direct. So I started looking around for a brokerage that could help me do direct trades. This is in the age of Uber, Airbnb. They were the hot companies.
Sure.
So I moved over to Rainmaker, and for the last 5-6 years, I've been exclusively doing private, late-stage pre-IPO companies, primarily for my Middle East clients, but more and more I have US clients, and I have a lot of connections in the VC community because I helped a lot of those guys and some women as well to raise capital in the Middle East. So
that is awesome.
That's kind of a long-winded story, but also explains a little bit my unique approach. I don't do the traditional investment banker kind of thing. I have just a handful of clients, 20, 30 buyers that I work closely with, and 20, 30 sellers that I really get to know well. And I help them to find the best prices when they make a decision.
That is fascinating. Okay, so you were mentioning earlier that you live in Portugal, right, in Europe from time to time. But you must spend a lot of time then in the Middle East, right, if you have LPs there?
I used to. I paid my dues. So I spent around 20 years going to weddings, going to late night sessions, smoking those hookahs until 3 in the morning.
There's trust.
So,
right.
Yeah. So I don't go that often, but I still have the connections there and the trust that I built up working with them more on a personal level. But maybe once a year I try to go over there.
Okay, gotcha. And then, so we were kind of talking before we started the thing, like how do you actually go about with your LPs? Do they come to you with a name that they're interested in? Or are you kind of saying, hey, this is in my like research coverage, and then you're proposing names to them? Like, how does that dynamic work with your investors and which names they select to invest into?
So I rarely, if ever, recommend I don't
Okay.
know if I have no idea if a security is going to go up or to zero. So
Okay.
what I do is clients will come to me and say, this is our target list. So like a buyer might say, Chad, we're looking at AI, which everyone is looking at right now,
Sure.
or we're looking at companies that fit these criteria. And then I can check our book at Rainmaker. And I should say a little something about Rainmaker in a moment to explain why it's useful for me to be there. I can look at my own supply and I can look at the Rainmaker supply, and then I can bring them the best pricing. Well, it's a little process of educating them. I'll tell them, these companies don't allow direct transfers, so you need to go to SPVs. Then I'll put together a report, various fees. There are a lot of sketchy players out there, so I spend a lot of time weeding through. Due diligence. Yeah, there's a lot of
smart.
Yeah, fake buyers and fake sellers. So I try to just make sure I don't waste their time. And so they come to me with what they're looking for, and then it's my job to find the best price.
Okay, so talk a little bit about what there was one point you made, several points you made that were interesting, but one in particular was this idea of like how you access a particular name, right? Like kind of like SpaceX, for example, that's usually SPVs only. There's very kind of few people that get added to the cap table there, right? So can you talk just about the different ways to access or kind of get exposure to this late stage pre-IPO stocks?
Yeah, there are a few. There's a closing. The window's closing on direct transactions. When we started, 90% of these companies you could do direct, except for Airbnb always was closed. Now more and more companies are either from the get-go they're blocking direct transfers, or what they're doing is when they do a tender, and if the employee participates in a tender or a VC, they sign away their rights to direct transferability. So the pool of people that have transferable shares is constantly shrinking, and the number of companies that allow direct trades is shrinking. So this has led to two things: an explosion in SPVs,
right?
Some of which are reasonable. And the ideal, of course, is a 0-0 SPV, but those are rare. And others are sort of Frankenstein monsters that are 2 and 20, double layer. They don't actually have the shares. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of SPVs. So we try to go for SPVs managed by respected groups with reasonable fees.
I got it. And is that part of the service that you're kind of offering to folks is looking at those SPVs and giving an opinion if that's a solid counterparty? Okay.
Exactly. If you came to me and said, I want to buy 10 million in SpaceX, what I would do is put together a report that shows all the inventory, all the carry, the management fee and the carry, and then there's a lot of hidden fees. Upfront, 5 years upfront management fee is a new development. So I try to put that in there. Does the manager have the shares, or are they hoping to use your money to buy shares? So basically, I try to put together a little matrix for my clients, and then they can see, and then they can make a decision. And if one of those fits in terms of size and price, then I make the introduction.
Okay, so that's SPVs. That's kind of SPVs and the different versions. Are there other ways? I mean, direct. You mentioned direct, but are there other ways that you're familiar with outside of those two that are
go ahead. Two other ways. So on the other extreme, I get to know employees as well as possible and companies, places like Flexport, Zipline, where I wrote one of the early research reports, and so I know them quite well. And employees have sent other employees to me, and I guess I'm the leading broker in that space. So 4 or 5 companies.
Okay.
So there, what we can do if there's a buyer, I have 30 or 40 sellers. These are under $1 million trades, though.
Okay.
And then I can just reach out and find out who at this moment is in need of liquidity. And often they will sell for a little bit less than what, say, ApeView is quoting, or what the last round, or what there's a possibility to arbitrage the liquidity needs of common shareholders. So most of the preferred shareholders are either waiting for an IPO or they're sticking to last round. But we do have a few VC clients that are willing to cobble together 4 or 5 employee transactions that are direct. I know the ROFR. I know pretty much what price is going to get ROFR'd. So we can work through that, and then they can build up a position that way. It's not as fast or as easy as just doing a $5 million check. But for a lot of these companies, there's not really another way to get access. So I work with employees also.
Got it. And then, so explain that ROFR piece too, because that's one thing that I've seen in my travels in the space is there's very much a difference between like investing into an SPV versus investing direct where there's a ROFR. Could you like explain that ROFR, like what that is and why that's important, and maybe why that's like a pro or a con on the direct side of trading?
So for the sellers, it's neither a pro or a con because they get paid regardless if the company exercises the ROFR. 99% of our sellers, direct sellers, have ROFR requirements. Basically, the company has 30 days to match the price. So it's very rare, however, because I already know what the ROFR price is. If you tried to buy Flexport or at $1 a share, which is 4 times less than the price out there, the company's just going to ROFR it. You won't get those shares. So I would tell you as a buyer from the beginning not to waste your time. If you don't follow my advice and you still put in an order for $1, 30 days later, the company will exercise its ROFR. You won't, you just lost time. You don't lose any money. The seller gets paid, and you then have to raise your price. So another part of my job is to know what the ROFR level is. And it also depends on the size. If you came with an order for 20 million into XYZ, they may not want to exercise ROFR. They might want to keep that cash. But if it's 200, 500,000, it's pretty tough. So part of my job is to tell you as a buyer, if you really want to get the stock, here's the minimum that you need to bid in order to actually get the shares at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're just helping my seller to get liquidity. Someone else will buy it.
So it sounds like there's kind of direct preferred trades, there's direct common trades, common share trades, there's like a 0-0 SPV, and then there's these, I think the word you used was like a Frankenstein version of that SPV, like there's dual layer and other. Can you talk a little bit more about that Frankenstein thing? Because that's something I find a lot of folks don't really fully appreciate some of the risk associated with these SPVs, right? Like there's a very simple, elegant way to do SPVs, and then there's like a very complicated way and perhaps risky way to do it. But I don't know if everyone fully appreciates the nuance between, kind of a direct 0-0 SPV that's super clean with a great, venture capital firm that's the GP on that SPV versus, something that might have a couple different layers in there. So could you walk through some of those dynamics?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing to keep in mind is there's nothing to prevent you or me or anybody, a guy at Starbucks from starting an SPV in Delaware and claiming that they have 100 million in SpaceX. That's legitimate. That happens all the time. Just today, I got one of these sellers saying we have, but it's all it's a little nuance. We have access to Anthropic or OpenAI. But if you really dig and you ask for proof of shares, they don't have anything. They just want your money, which they're then going to use to try to hustle and get shares. And then in the end, what happens generally is if you are foolish enough to send them your cash, they say, "Oh, it was oversubscribed. We didn't get any allocation. Sorry," and they'll send your money back. We don't see a lot of fraud where they're actually stealing. They're just wasting people's time, which is a certain crime, if you in my book.
Right.
So that's very common, and we avoid that. The other situation is the 2-layer SPV. So that's someone who creates an SPV. They don't know anyone at SpaceX, but they then invest in other SPVs. So the problem there is you may have a 2-in-20 SPV that's invested in a 2-in-20 SPV. And if you're a VC fund charging 2-in-20 to your LPs, you just can't do it.
Too
the fees
expensive.
just are ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah. So I try to focus on, and I tell everyone, all my transactions are with buyers who have cash on hand and sellers who have proof of shares. And if we have those two things, we can talk. And
real people. Yeah.
And it's just a matter of matching the size and the price.
Okay, so Chad, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to just say that it's easier said than done, because there are a lot of buyers who claim to have money, but it's not their money. It's some mysterious LPs that they want to round up. Now, sometimes there are syndicators that have very good relationships with their LPs, and I work with them because they during that 30-day ROFR period, for instance, they make a few calls and they get the $5 million consistently.
Right.
But you need to know those people, and you need to know who to trust.
I found that to be true. Like when I go to trade, I actually send a redacted bank statement and show. I call it proof of funds, and then people take you much more seriously, right? Because they know you're a real buyer. You have real cash, and you can actually transact.
I also wanted to say there's a third way that we provide access, and it's growing in popularity. And that is, at Rainmaker, we have some relationships with early stage investors in high demand companies. And that could be SpaceX, Anthropic, Figure AI. Are companies I've worked on in the last few months, and Grok, for instance. So we have an allocation that's tied to an upcoming primary round. So let's say an early stage investor talks to the founder and says, "Look, put us in for $100 million in this round that's coming up next month." And this happened with Figure AI, for instance.
Okay.
And what they'll do is they'll put in $50 million of their own money, and then they'll create an SPV for $50 million of other people's money, which
so interesting.
They can tack on 2 in 20 or 1 in 10 even, get some new clients. If you're only doing 1, or even I did 6 million in Figure. If you're only doing 5 million, let's say, they're not going to talk to you. Figure's not. They don't want your 5 million. They're doing 100 million checks. They want strategic partners. BMW, Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
So this provides a new way for investors to get access to companies. So it's a bit of a hybrid. It's an SPV because you're not on the cap table, but you're one step removed. What's interesting is it usually comes with the data room, the same data room that the company used to put together its primary round.
Okay.
Another advantage is you generally get in at the same price. For instance, when we did Figure, it was the same price that Bezos and Gates found. All the other buyers paid. So there's generally no premium there.
Right.
The main disadvantage is there are fees. So we take the base price, which is the price of the round. You add some commission, brokerage commission, and then whatever the fees are that the manager puts on.
Sure.
Usually 1 to 10 is 110 is minimum.
It's fair.
And so we're seeing that. I've got my hands full with these kinds of deals now. People like them because of the pluses that I outlined. I like them because they're all really cool companies, and people can get in you don't have to argue that the valuation is reasonable, because it's today's valuation. And data rooms are really rare. Many people ask me, second question they ask me, I want to buy, and can you get me financials? And I just say, you have to wait for the IPO. It's not really for you.
Yes. So Chad, I got to tell you, this dynamic that you're bringing up, I'm seeing it with more companies, right? Where this is almost what you just described is almost investment banking. Like, I think maybe 10 years ago, Figure AI would have gone to like a Goldman Sachs or a Morgan Stanley and a JP Morgan and said, "Hey, I need to raise, $150 million. Can you go to pensions, endowments, foundations, and other hedge funds, whoever, and like raise that money for me?" And then their CFO would go and do a roadshow, and they'd have a pitch book and a data room and the whole thing. Now these companies are going to existing folks on their cap table, or venture capital firms. They have relationships, and they're working through firms like yourself, like folks like yourselves, to go out and raise this capital, as opposed to like going into a Goldman or a Morgan Stanley. Is that a fair assessment? Do you think of some of the dynamics that's happening right now in the market?
Yeah, I think it's win-win for everyone. So the company doesn't have to deal with a new cap table first. They know the fund. The fund gets new LPs. We've already seen in a few cases where there's been follow-up investments on other offerings. So the person who has access gets new clients. For them, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million high net worth individual, it's worth something. And the clients are happy so far because there's no other way that they could have gotten access. So I don't know if this is going to keep, if this trend will continue, but as the direct options close and as existing SPVs continue to either be really hot companies with super high fees and valuations that are astronomical, this is kind of the sweet spot, kind of a hybrid. So I'm putting a lot of, it's taking a lot of my time, and I'm excited about it.
No, I mean, this is interesting because it really kind of drives home the point. It drives home the point of best pricing in this space. Because I have to tell you, this is one thing I think a lot of folks put a lot of onus on access, which is hard, right, for these companies. But kind of best pricing is maybe an afterthought, or counterparty risk is maybe an afterthought. But it seems like you're spending, that's a lot of the value that you're adding for your LPs, for your investors, is that you're helping them make sure that they get a good price, right, and that they're also getting a good counterparty. Like that's unique. I got to tell you, Chad. I am in the space. Like, I feel like that's a unique thing that you're offering to your clients.
I mean, a lot of these people I've known for 20 years, and I've always promised them, or even longer in some cases, I've always promised them, I will not waste your time. That's my number one promise to them. I can't promise you that this company is going to go, 10x. I can't promise you that it's not going to go bankrupt. What I can promise you is that I won't waste your time. And so far, I've been able to fulfill that pledge.
That's nice. That's nice. Well, it's certainly unique. I spent a lot of time in there. Like, look, just like you mentioned, there's a lot of interesting counterparties in the kind of the SPV space. Some are more real than others. I think that same is true for folks that do what you do, right? It's definitely you're definitely firmly in the good category, right? Of people that do this position. So kudos to you.
Well, I would say that to everyone out there to realize this is a very small world. And if you are a buyer and you fall down on a trade, if you agree to a price and start the ROFR, and my client starts making plans, whether to buy a house or whatever, and then at the last minute you back out, that's a black mark that goes on your record. I mean, we don't work with you again. And I get calls all the time from other brokers saying, be careful about this seller, be careful about this buyer. Now, obviously, there are some very few situations where maybe a company reports a problem with the CEO. The CEO leaves during the ROFR period. Okay, this is understandable, but that's not what I'm talking about. So if you're not honest, if you're a shady player, if you're selling something you don't have, if you're not really buying, but you're just fishing for pricing, any of those things, it's eventually going to come back to hurt you, because it's a small world, and all of us, I think everyone has the goal not to waste time. And that's why we keep notes on who's closed. People ask me, my seller today asked me, you have a buyer. Okay, have they closed before? And the buyer asked me the same. Has this seller closed? So
right. Real.
It's in everyone's interest to just, okay.
Yeah, that's like that's like a very old school Wall Street type thing, right? And that's actually what I love about this market, is that there's a lot of trust. To your point, what you're describing is trust, right? And reputation. It's not just legal and stuff that you see on screen or technology. Like, there are humans, and you have to follow through and deliver, and people have to trust you, and you have to have a good reputation, and then people will take you serious, and you'll get access to better deals, and you get better pricing, and a lot of good things happen, right? But
I mean,
But you definitely have to be a real person.
The best trade of my life was when I was sitting in Riyadh with an amazing manager and an old school Saudi.
Okay.
And we were talking about, I don't know, we were just talking not about finance. We were just talking about companies.
Okay.
And at the end of the meeting, this prince just reached up, shook my client's hand, and said, "Oh, count me in for $1 billion."
Oh
And
my
then we
gosh.
left. Yeah, I know. And we left. And afterwards, it was kind of a flurry. Like, wait, where's the documents? I mean, what can we trust this? And I said, look, it's Saudi. It's old school. I mean, this was 15 years ago. I think it may have changed a bit, but
Sure. Right. Yeah.
sure enough, the money arrived.
That's amazing.
That's before I got, yeah. So that kind of memory, and on both sides, these were old school, and my clients were old school Middle East traders, people where a handshake is key. So that's maybe kind of in my DNA, and I try to apply that to everyone that I work with, and the VC funds too. There are great players out there, people who want to build long-term relationships. They're not looking for just a quick fees or these fly-by-night. So anyway, it's the basis
That's
of
super
my
interesting.
business. I want to tell you how Rainmaker fits into this whole thing.
Yeah, go ahead, please do that.
So when I started looking for a new brokerage, I had a bunch of places where I could go. So I picked Rainmaker for a couple reasons. First was, most important to me, was the depth of their book. So there are 70 brokers at Rainmaker. I'm one of them. Each of us are independent entrepreneurs. I still was able to run my trade mission and go and hang out with the ambassadors and run these kind of private conferences while under the umbrella of Rainmaker. So they handled all of my compliance. They still do compliance, accounting. It's all back office. And they plugged me into a network of 70 other kind of like-minded brokers. What's awesome about that is I don't know anything about India. I don't know anything about Asia. I don't know anything about crypto. I don't know anything about South America. But I do know the Middle East, for instance.
Okay.
But if I have someone who wants crypto, or I have someone who wants, we have people in Silicon Valley who are really close to these companies and can get us access to primary rounds. And so oftentimes, this is invisible. This is invisible to the buyer or seller. I remain the point of contact. But I can call up Glenn, our CEO, who is an amazing guy. He's one of the first. He's been in this business longer than anyone, I think. Started back in Facebook days. And Glenn's personality and straight shooting kind of, reputation, super important. No room for, I don't know if I can say this. No assholes, no bullshit. That's what Glenn told me when I met him. And
smart.
For me,
good philosophy.
To bring my 20-year-old Saudi client relationships to this platform, it was an easy decision. So I went with Rainmaker mainly because of Glenn and his reputation and his experience. Secondarily, the depth of our book. So today I think we have around 2 billion in bids and 2 billion in asks. So that allows me, like I said, I cover closely only a dozen or so companies, but I have access to 100 or more. That comes through Rainmaker. So what's cool about Rainmaker is each of us can be a specialist in our own area, and we have. And so I have a 70-person team that I can collaborate with, and the back office. So Rainmaker really is, for me, it's great. And the icing on the cake is we've launched RMX, which is an online platform. Data partner is ApeView. So clients, and this to me, I'm a big believer in technology, and I believe if you're a brokerage that doesn't have a platform, you're not going to be around. So my clients can log in, they can see pricing, they can make a bid, they can put in an offer, and then rolling out in the next few months, they'll be able to do as much as the transaction can be done without a broker. They'll be able to do the matching. Of course,
that's interesting.
There'll always be a broker there to make the introduction, to make sure that everything's kosher. but we're moving to make it as efficient as possible, and the 24/7 online platform is definitely the way to go. So Rainmaker has that now, which is really cool.
Very cool. That's very cool. I'll have to make sure to check that out. So one last thing, and then I'll let you go, right? But you mentioned something I come across a lot in my travels is folks just do not believe that they can buy like late stage pre-IPO stocks. They're shocked. And because I primarily deal with independent financial advisors here in the US, right? So they're like, wait, I can buy Anthropic, I can buy SpaceX, I can buy OpenAI, like. And yes, it's not like, you open up Schwab order entry and you put in a ticker symbol and you can buy the stock, right? It's obviously much more thoughtful than that. But I mean, you mentioned earlier, like you guys have access to 100 names, right? So can you just talk a little bit about, the ability to buy these companies, right? And maybe just put some color around what's available, what's not available. Is it always available? Do things kind of come in and out from a liquidity perspective? Like, just give me some thoughts there on just the market in general.
Two things. First thing I would say is I noticed recently on Notice, where anyone can put in bids, there are a lot of people bidding $10,000 on SpaceX or $20,000. If you're bidding $10,000, you don't belong in this space. It's too risky. It's not for retail investors. This is casino money. You should treat it 5% of your portfolio. It's just for fun. I can't see any strategic value to a portfolio. The value is intellectual, because you're going to be learning about, talking with, and investing in the companies that are absolutely, it's not an exaggeration to say, changing our planet. I mean, I saw you talking about OpenAI, Figure, Grok, SpaceX. The companies we work on are absolutely intellectually fascinating and are going to change our lives. And if you have 250,000, that's the minimum, I would say, the minimum ticket size, really.
Right.
Because otherwise, legal fees, it doesn't make sense.
It's too much. Yeah.
Because a lot of these trades, there's a $5,000 legal fee. We have minimum commissions. We're not going to do a trade unless the commission comes out to at least around $10,000. So if you're doing a $25,000 trade, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And it's not suitable also. It's too risky. There's too many potential WeWorks out there. But if you're a professional, if you've got 5% allocated to this space, and you're intellectually stimulated by the idea, and you want to be involved in cutting edge companies, you can definitely buy trade shares directly or via 00 SPV. It's a question of, are you willing to pay the price? Because the top 10 names, everyone wants them, and the valuations are quite high. If you're looking for, a lot of people come to me and say, I want profitable companies with an IPO in 2 years at a reasonable valuation, and I want financials.
Yeah, I want that too.
Yes. So if you have realistic expectations and you're willing to pay, and what's really great about ApeView and Notice is that now I can show, and I couldn't do this 2-3 years ago, I can show my clients, look, this is what the last trade was at. Right, this is where buyers and sellers are at. You're offering $10. There are the lowest sellers at $30. So if you're willing to pay, the right, the crossing price, you can definitely find a broker. All of our engagements are non-exclusive. So I tell everyone, find 2 or 3 brokers that you like and be honest about your goals and see what they can find for you. And, and if we're able to, the broker that does does the best homework and gets the best price, it might be an SPV, but they're definitely out there. It's definitely available. We're trading, I think we've traded in this year, we used to do 2-3 billion a year in transactions. Last year was a little bit rough, but we survived. This
But
year we're
all different names, right? Right, Chad? All different kind of names
yes,
across that
yeah.
number. Yeah.
You can see our books. You know, we have there's probably 100 names, and maybe 50 of them are pretty active. And of course, SpaceX, Anthropic, Figure, Grok, Databricks, Stripe. I mean, the well-known names were very active in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you've got the risk tolerance and you are also realistic about the information limitations and the pricing, you can get access. I'm surprised to hear that people thought they couldn't. My problem is that there are retail investors that think they can, and it's not appropriate for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they should look to probably invest in a venture capital fund if they can hit the minimums and things like that,
or
right?
ETF.
It's got to be.
Or
right. It's just got to be the asset allocation. When you mentioned earlier, so you just got to have the right asset allocation. You shouldn't get too heavy in this space if you're a retail investor. That's very good advice or guidance.
Yeah, I would also just say that, you know, I guess I would backtrack a little bit. I do have VC funds that are seed investors, and now the companies are getting ready for IPO. So it's style drift, and for them, obviously, for a seller, in that case, it's logical. You know, they're doing this for the sound financial reasons, sellers.
Right. Yeah.
Very rarely does a buyer have a sound financial reason. It's more that they believe in the sector and they want to try for a home run.
Yeah, make a bet. Yeah, which is, you know, that's power law investing in venture capital, right? So you gotta catch kind of lightning in a bottle there. So this is good. Okay, Chad, this is awesome. Thank you for spending so much time with me. If folks want to get in touch with you and work with you and to access this space in secondary market, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
You can. The easiest is to search Chad Gracia. There's only one Chad Gracia out there. You might find a filmmaker that's referenced, but that's also me. That's my hobby, my side job. Rainmakersecurities.com or GraciaGroup.com. But easiest is just to search for Chad Gracia.
Gracia, Gracia, right? You got it. Okay,
Gracia, yeah.
Very good. Well, this has been an absolute
happy
pleasure.
to help anyone, walk anyone through it. I love talking about this stuff, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or provide pricing. Let people know if it's right for them.
That's perfect. Well, I got to tell you, kudos to you. You're definitely one of the good ones. That much I can tell, and you're an absolute gentleman. So thank you for taking time to speak. It's very good of you.
Same to you. Great to meet you. And
okay, thanks, Chad.
Let's do this again in a year.
I'd like that. I'd like that a lot. Okay, thanks.
Ciao.
Bye now.